Hey everyone, and welcome to the 1312 GitLab Kickoff. I am Kenny Johnston. I'm a product leader here at GitLab, and I'm going to be your MC for today. We're going to be covering the 1312 release, and that will be released in just a little bit over a month's time on May 22nd. If you want to follow along, you can go, you can visit, let me share my screen real quick. You can visit about.gitlab.com/direction/kickoff for all the issues and epics and YouTube playlists for the over 30 plus product groups that are contributing to our 1312 release. As usual, I want to remind you that here at GitLab, we plan ambitiously. And so, and we also emphasize velocity over predictability. So not all the issues that we outline in this kickoff discussion or the various kickoff videos do we plan to have shipped in this milestone. I also wanted to highlight, as a reminder, our FY22 product investment themes, which include application security testing leadership and our work to build a better and more industry-leading application security testing platform, adoption through usability to encourage more use of our complete DevOps platform, and a focus on SaaS first. And I also wanted to take a moment to thank all the GitLab team members who have been helping with scalability and reliability improvements, primarily for our GitLab.com service, but that will be to the benefit of all of our self-managed users and GitLab.com instances across the world. It's been a lot of heads down work across a number of teams, and they've delivered some great real results over the last 4 to 6 weeks. With that, let me go through a roll call of who we're going to hear from today and covering what's planned in 1312. We'll start with David, who's going to cover the dev and sec sections. John will cover enablement, and then I will bring us home covering the ops section. So with that, let me stop sharing, and David, over to you.
Thank you, Kenny. And let me get my screen shared here. Great, so we're gonna dive into the dev section first with create. Just to echo what Kenny mentioned, a big thank you to everyone who's been working on the infra and scalability items. And you'll see that as a recurring theme as we talk through what the dev and sec sections are doing today. So first with create, the source code group is heavily focused, heads down on the items that Kenny just mentioned, infradev and performance. They are going to be working on one specific item I did want to highlight for you that is more feature focused, which is changing the default branch name for new projects on GitLab.com. This is part of the move away from master for the default branch name as part of Git. And starting with 1312, new projects on GitLab.com will be using the new name of main. The code review team is beginning their work on their OKR for the next quarter. This is going to be focused on improving the merge request experience. As you can see highlighted in the title, we're going to be focusing on making the experience of large MRs 40% faster, as well as decreasing the amount of RAM that is needed as part of that merge request experience. An example of that is defining what a large MR actually is based off input from customers and us reviewing telemetry data. And that really is going to come down to talking about the file sizes, the file types, the number of files, lines within there, commits and comments and so forth. And by taking that, we'll be addressing that 99th percentile of what a large MR is. The code editor team is going to be focused on continuing their work on improving the global navigation at the top of the screen and kind of remind you what that looks like. Here's a screenshot. So we'll be collapsing that top menu down to a single option that'll then include all the components that you're commonly used to, such as projects, groups, and so forth. This work also includes improving how we identify recently visited projects. There's also some new capabilities in the future, like allowing you to star a project. The work will also be kicked off for the left navigation, which you can see nicely here. We just completed our user research, so the team is compiling that data, and starting with 1312 to begin the work of re-architecting that left navigation. And then finally, concluding create with Gitly. Again, focus on infradev and scalability. And here, this is one of the items they're going to be working on, focused on improving count commits by leveraging commit graph. You can see in the snapshot here, this is somewhere around a 5x improvement on performance. So this is just one of the little components that the team is working on improving scalability and then by extension, usability. The Gitly team is also continuing their work on incremental backups. And this is, of course, leveraging Gitly to be able to do something that the Git protocol itself doesn't do well natively. So that work will continue in 1312 as well. Moving over to the plan stage, same thing. They're very much focused on infradev and improving usability. You can see here, if we scroll down, there's a bunch of items related to performance, quality of life, and some infra items. The one I want to highlight for you is improving our API responsiveness for the group issues API. And you can see today, we have a nice high spike on usage and memory when hitting those APIs. Our goal is to greatly reduce that as part of the work in 13.12. The product planning team, same thing, very much focused on improving the availability and scalability. However, they look to also complete their MVC2 work on Epic boards. This will allow reordering and editing of the boards, and you can of course see that here as part of their work. And then finally, the certified team is going to be working with InfraDev to be able to build out a dashboard so we can monitor the usage of the certified components. From that, we'll be able to then begin outside of 13.12, also looking at availability, scalability items for there as well. And then finally, within the dev section is the manage stage. Manage stage, again, will also be working on those same items. However, to the themes that Kenny talked about at the beginning, the access team is going to be focusing on SAML enforcement by default when it's enabled. Today, you can see a screenshot of our UI here. You would enable the SAML authentication. However, the SSO only authentication was not enabled by default. That was an option you had to enable. So for projects that are now enabling it, that'll be enabled by default, along with a warning letting you know that disabling that does actually introduce a security risk. For the certified or for the optimized team, they're focused on improving the DevOps adoption report. In 13.11, we talked about how that was going to move out of the instance level down to the project level. They're now going to begin to expand what is in that report. And that includes breaking it out across the three main components of DevSecOps, which of course are Dev, Sec, and Ops. It works out well, those names match the term there. But that allows them to be able to give you granular detail into each of those components of the product and see how it's being adopted. An example of this in 13.12 is building out the backend to be able to report whether or not SaaS and DAST are actually adopted by your group in your projects. Of course, this is the first step, bring it into the API, and then we'll be bringing it into the UI in a future release. And last, and definitely not least, the import team will be working on allowing you to import from object storage. This again falls into availability and scalability. Today, there are limits on how large a project can be to be brought in via the API, and this is going to allow you to actually grab those objects from an object storage as opposed to grabbing them the traditional way through the UI. This will allow us to be able to import larger projects without that same timeout that exists today. And then to move over to the SEC section, first with secure, the stack analysis team is working on bringing SEMGREP from experimental to generally available. It's a very exciting step forward in this milestone. This is going to allow us to begin to deprecate out older scanners in preparation for 14.0. SEMGREP is going to be supporting JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python initially as part of the 13.12 milestone. The stack analysis team is also going to be bringing to general availability our new improved vulnerability tracking. We used to refer to this as vulnerability fingerprinting on previous release kickoff calls. But again, you can see this is tied back to us moving SEMGREP to generally available, as well as supporting GoSec as well. Longer term stretch items for this also relates to bringing in some of the secret detection components as well. However, very excited to see our new vulnerability tracking coming into GA. For the dynamic analysis team, they're focused on the on-demand scheduling. This has been a continued iteration that we've been highlighting on each call to kind of give you a sample of what that looks like. And I can't stress how awesome iteration is enough. I think about maybe 4 or 5 months ago on the kickoff call, I said, we're gonna have on-demand scanning. I'm like, you type in a name and type in a URL. Now we have a lot of settings that are available to you, whether that's scan or site profile configurations. But now at the bottom, we'll have the ability to schedule a scan. So you go in here, you can check it, set when you want it to run and hit save. And then when that time comes, that scan will automatically run. A longer term, you'll be able to come in and set the repeats. And if you set it to repeat, say every week against your default branch, that's going to actually create a permanent security policy that can then be tracked through our security orchestration. For the competition analysis team, they're focused on their MVC implementation of UI configuration. This is something that's been a big project for them. It was put on hold as part of helping optimize our database queries for, again, availability and scalability. To kind of show what that looks like the other scanners before it, you'll have an enable button on the configuration page. From there, that'll open up a merge request and we'll add the default configurations for dependency scanning into your GitLab CI YAML file. And then lastly, for secure, the Threat Insights team is continuing to optimize the performance of the dashboards and the security reports. In this milestone, they're going to be working on introducing vulnerabilities by age. This will be a new component on the security dashboards. You can see here at the top, you have the option to select between stacked or tiered. And then of course, it's going to show you that by age across the x-axis. This is really about that AST leadership theme, as well as, again, allowing us to be able to provide you additional details on the current state of your projects. Of course, if you hover over it, you can see it and you can drill down to it as well. And then again, finally, but not last or least, is the protect stage. They're focused on two items I wanted to highlight for you. The first is the other half of that dynamic analysis with on-demand scheduling, and they'll be introducing scheduled scans as part of the security orchestration component of our product. Very exciting to be able to see this, where you'll be able to set which profiles you want run when, whether that's scanning against an application you've deployed in production, or setting that your default branch gets scanned on a regular schedule. And then wrapping up, we're also going to be finalizing our work to cut over to Trivy from Claire and Clark for container scanning. In 13.12, we'll be focused on doing the final testing. I do want to say a big thank you to all the users who are using Trivy over the last couple of milestones for us by enabling its experimental setting. We've been able to take that data and understand what we need to finish doing to make sure we're ready for this cutover. I'm also very excited about it because it means that GitLab is also going to be contributing to another open source community that would be doing what we've done in the past with other protect categories. So contributing to the Trivy project outside of just what we would be doing for integration. And that wraps up the dev and sec sections. With that, I'd like to hand it over to John to go over enablement.
All right, thank you, David. All right, so I am going to take you through the enablement section. Enablement, we have three focus areas: adoption through usability, new markets, and SaaS first. Starting off with adoption through usability, the first thing that we have is for global search. We want to lock the order of the scope tabs that appear in the search page. Today they disappear and will sometimes move around. We're going to lock this order in so that it is easier to navigate. The next thing, we're going to be adding multi-select to project dropdowns. So this will allow you to select more than one project at a time instead of actually choosing all the projects or one project. And the next item that we have is for geo, secondary mimicry. So secondary mimicry is the idea that the UX on the secondary site should behave like the UX from the primary site. So the next thing that we're going to be doing with this is to proxy over the request to the primary site. This will allow users to use the same URL, and users will automatically be routed to the closest GitLab node to keep it super fast. The proof of concept for this is already complete, and you can see this in progress now. So the next piece that we're going to be going to is new markets. So with new markets, we're going to support deploying GitLab to OpenShift GA. We have completed part of this already, and we're going to be moving to the pre-GA component. GA is what we refer to for generally available. So our beta is basically complete. Now we're actually going to start working through some of the feedback that's happened from this beta and make it generally available. All right, and the next area that we have is for SaaS first. And SaaS first, we have three different pieces. The first one is Geo with Patroni support for beta. So the Patroni piece, we're working through making this available for customers who want to use several Postgres nodes in high availability to the failover site. This will allow for secondary site to handle the load without having to manually scale up first. Today, you can actually handle that load, but you have to do a manual scale up to restore HA. The next piece is for reducing memory consumption in Puma and Sidekick endpoints. And finally, the last piece that we have is coming from our database team. So the database group has made serious progress in the effort to migrate to big INT. It used to take us about 45 days to migrate 1 billion records. We've now updated the migration framework for this so that we can do the migration with live tweaks and be able to monitor it in real time. This new framework means that we can now migrate 1 billion records in as little as 3 days with zero downtime while we do it. And that is what we have for enablement. Back to you, Kenny.
Awesome, thanks, John. All right, I am going to cover the ops section before bringing us home. So let me share my screen. As a reminder to everyone, the ops section is comprised of 5 stages: verify, package, release, configure, and monitor. And I'm going to be covering scheduled improvements for 13.12 in those 5 stages. The first item that I wanted to highlight was an improvement to the actions when you're viewing a pipeline. So today, when you view a pipeline, there are a series of actions, and we've been slowly adding to that series of actions over time, where you can download artifacts or rerun a pipeline or cancel a pipeline. All with these actions, I'm moving my cursor over here. That continues to take up more and more horizontal screen real estate in our pipeline view. And so we are in 13.12, we're going to be improving that user experience so that we have a ellipsis dropdown for those items, which will also allow us to add more contextual items to those actions that you can perform when viewing a list of pipelines. So the common one might be to retry a pipeline or to cancel a pipeline if it was created and maybe immediately outdated. Yeah, there's a picture of that. The next improvement we're doing is within our pipeline authoring group to add a pipeline drawer to the pipeline editor. So today, when you're using our pipeline editor in the GitLab application, it can give you immediate feedback about the linting or how your pipeline will look when before you submit it into GitLab, your GitLab CI YAML. But we're going to add a drawer, a right side drawer to this editor experience that also gives you at the moment tips and tricks for getting started with GitLab CI pipeline. But we plan this as an MVC to continue to add suggested improvements and suggested pipeline templates or next steps for continuing to iterate on your GitLab CI pipeline. We're also making a usability improvement in verify in our testing category, where today, if you have a test job and there are no artifacts that meet a certain standard for displaying in the test artifacts directly in your MR, we don't show you any information about, well, what could I do in order to make sure there are tests shown here? And so we're going to start by adding documentation link in this empty state so that you can immediately read documentation about how you could ensure your pipeline is generating and supplying a report so that it's showcased right here for your users in their MR. The next feature I wanted to highlight was group level permissions. And so today, it's often important that we segregate permissions not just by users and projects, but also by environments. And so this table is showcasing that you might have permissions as a developer to deploy to lower environments like a dev or testing or maybe even the staging environment, but you probably don't want to give all developers permissions to deploy to staging and production environments. And so we're going to be adding the ability at the group level to assign group level protected environments that can only be deployed to by specific permissions. So this table kind of outlines our plan for what permissions might be allowed when an environment is defined as protected at a group level. The next improvement that I wanted to highlight was also in the release stage, where today, if you have a manual pipeline that does a deployment, for example, and you click the button to manually perform the action of deploying, this is the kind of current state where you would click deploy, you don't immediately get feedback that that deployment job is running. And so we're going to be making a UI enhancement so that when you click that button to deploy, it actually turns gray and shows you that it's working to start that deploy, and then we'll immediately add the ability for the stop button to be clicked so that you get immediate feedback that the action you were intending to take is being taken. The next feature I wanted to cover is in our configure stage, and it is about our Kubernetes agent. So in a couple of days, we're going to be announcing the GA of our Kubernetes agent available on gitlab.com. And we're planning in the subsequent milestone to add a more robust UI for adding and registering that agent. Today, at launch, it requires a couple of API calls in order to officially register and receive a token for your agent to then do the installation. So we have some great designs for the process of installing your new Kubernetes agent. And as a reminder, the Kubernetes agent will allow you to more readily do pull-based deployments or have more control over the access that GitLab or other entities are given to your Kubernetes cluster, so that you can maintain some separation between GitLab and your GitLab users and the Kubernetes clusters that are going to be managed or deployed to from GitLab. Lastly, we have an MVC in our monitor stage that I'm really excited about. So if you've been keeping track, we've added incident management and on-call schedule management, trying to build a kind of complete incident management platform for within GitLab. And our next process is going to be adding an MVC for escalation policies, which allows you to say, hey, if there's an alert or an incident, I want to, in a progressive fashion, continue to escalate higher and higher, either within my org or the method of communication. So maybe from a GitLab notification to an email to pager is a pretty common process with incident responders. So as an MVC, we're going to be adding the ability to populate a new escalation policy. So in this example, you can set time bounds for when someone who's scheduled to be on call should respond, and if they don't, then we might escalate to a specific user. In this case, it's this user mentioned here. This is an example of what that escalation policy will look like, once defined after you've created it. But it's an initial MVC to continue to build out our ability to have a kind of complete incident response platform right within the same platform that you do CI/CD and development. So those are the highlights for the ops section. I want to transition to kind of my conclusion of overall. First of all, I have to say, wow, I think there is a lot that we cram into just a single month's release. And I'm really excited for some of the improvements that my peers mentioned here. Let me just rattle off a couple of them. First was deploying GitLab to OpenShift GA, super exciting. Second one was improvements to the large MR experience, global navigation improvements I'm excited to see in 13.12. I was really excited about what David described in the DevOps adoption report, where we're showcasing to users the ability, how much adoption there has been of GitLab's complete platform within GitLab. The SemGrep general availability, global search improvements were super exciting. One thing that John mentioned that I want to highlight, the primary key migration. It's important to note that the reason why we're experiencing that need for a really robust primary key migration is because we're scaling so large. We have millions of CI jobs every day. We have tons of usage of our platform, and that is forcing us to need to be able to do these primary key migrations to larger and larger order sets for primary keys really rapidly. So that's an exciting thing that is a symptom of our great progress. So congratulations to all the teams involved there. It's really inspiring for me personally to be part of this team and the kind of incredible vision that we're outlining for a complete DevOps platform and providing to our users. I personally am sure that 13.12 is going to be the best release ever. If you're so inclined, please take a moment to provide us feedback via the feedback link here on the kickoff page. And again, thank you all for attending.